Athens Shade Tree Commission. And we can now come to order, please. We have a pretty full agenda. We have two tree permits to start the agenda. And the first one is, let us take this, the simplest one first. And that is something that's in, oh, Paul. Somebody have an agenda for
Here.
this.
Thanks.
Okay, the first item is something that came in as a call to me from a resident at 80 South Shannon, concern over a silver maple at that address. And a person with tree service experience had expressed some concern about some of the dead limbs on the silver maple. So Ann visited the silver maple. Ann Bonner is the Ohio Department of Natural Resources urban forester, whom we use as the city's virtual arborist. So she made some suggestions about that. If you'd like to just tell us briefly.
And I realized there wasn't a permit on that, and so, you know, I didn't pass along any promises to that property owner, but there is a significantly large dead branch on that tree. It is a tree that otherwise is in great shape. It's one that the city's done work on years ago. I remember visiting that tree. So I think just some simple dead wood pruning would, and I don't think it's an emergency either. I suggested to the gal that once we got it, you know, the paper trail set out, you know, I didn't know when that would happen, but it could be maybe put on another maintenance contract in the fall or something.
How do folks feel about following Ann's suggestion for a dead wood pruning on the old
I
silver
move
maple?
that we follow that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Well, this then will go on, we have a current contract started with a removal, and so that can happen probably within possibly even this month, I suppose. Okay, well, that will, okay. That later. And our next tree permit is one that has a long history and some drama with trying to figure out the right-of-way, because it's a very complicated site. And this is at 20 North May. We have some maps here, and the Code Enforcement Office has really done yeoman service on this, going out to measure and determine. And it was with the help of the property owner just recently, and the Code Enforcement Officer, Brian Zulik, going back, that a pin was found, a surveyor's pin, and that really made it clear where the right-of-way is. And so we now know that several trees here, a black locust, a silver maple, and a honey locust, that the property owner is concerned about, are indeed in the right-of-way. And Ann has done an assessment for the city on the status of these things. If I might just let's see. Again, should we have you tell us the assessment of these trees? These.
Well, you know, it's again, I in my memo out to you guys, did you guys get to see this? Because I just want to reinforce, you know, the notion that there are always trees that need maintenance on the right-of-way and maybe on private land that might threaten the right-of-way. And so I just always try to keep city resources at the top of my priority list, of course, with public safety. And, you know, I didn't feel that these trees were a public safety hazard or a public safety issue. You know, they are kind of in a naturalized area, as what's common with a lot of new property owners when they come in and there are a lot of trees on a property. I think a lot of times there's a feeling or perception that we got to do something about the trees first. So I did. We did actually remove, I think, 2 trees last year, or maybe 1.
Yes, one. Been more than a year. Well, at the point where she'd just gotten the property.
Okay. Maybe I thought it was last year. Maybe it was 2 years ago. But anyways, there is about the only one that I thought really had a significant defect was the locust. And maybe you guys could walk by and look at it. And the problem is there's some dead wood in some of these trees. And I think a lot of it is that property owner wants to change the look of that property, and some of that I think is beyond the scope of what we do, you know, to protect public safety. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. We should note that
Andy Stone previously said that he would prefer those trees to be left in place because of their ability to hold back the water when it's flowing rapidly through that creek.
For public information, Andy Stone is the director of streets, and we have the interim director of streets here, Ron Lucas. Thank you very much. And the concern that Andy Stone had at the time was to have this drainage issue that is nicely addressed right now by kind of wild, well, it's not exactly wild, but there is a complicated flow there thanks to the fact that there are a lot of trees and that the run is not completely mowed. It's a natural area.
And I think, too, one of the things I explained to the property owner was that, you know, especially going out and clearing just a few trees is going to open that, unless they have a plan to put something back or a different plan for maintaining it, with all the invasive exotics that are just waiting in the wings, you know, the honeysuckles and the garlic mustards. Anytime, you know, there's a removal there, the poison ivy, which is an exotic, but that's going to be a challenging area to manage. So if nature's doing the work for us, I'd say let's try to maintain it in that way. But
Anybody have any comments, concerns about the property? I would suggest that we not use the city's resources to remove these trees. That this is really something that, for purposes of city drainage, it is better that the trees stay there and they appear to be healthy and not a public hazard. Paul?
So if they, when you say not use the city resources, it almost implies that if they use their resources, it would be okay to do, but it sounds like it's not. No. I mean, the recommendation you'll give to these owners is not to cut the trees down?
That's right, is in denial.
Okay.
would it be worthwhile, though, to allow them to do some pruning, you know, to allay their, you know, because, you know, this is a repetitive issue on that site. And believe me, I have all people, I walk that over lunch, you know, and it's a beautiful area, and I understand the functions that the trees are providing. I mean, just as I wonder if we shouldn't just, have you guys all seen it? Because there is some dead wood in the trees. Now, I don't think they're a threat to the traveling public. I mean, it's a small road, and it's not like they're, you know, it's in a really exposed spot where those trees are just going to fall over. But, you know, would that be...
There would be no problem in allowing them to do deadwood pruning, would there?
Yeah, that would be, this would be an example of something where, Paul, it would be all right for the property owner, with our permission, to do pruning with their own contractors. But this is really something more for the convenience of the property owner than for the city's needs.
I guess the question I was asking there is when you say, okay, we won't do it, but by implication, if they say, we'll do it, I mean, that would, it sounds like you want to train the trees for drainage. Okay, and I'm just getting a feel for this, so therefore, you know, I can see somebody say, oh, deadwood, it's all deadwood all the way down to the stump, and or will be soon, you know.
No,
So,
this is a knowledgeable person about property and trees,
okay.
and so she would hire somebody
Yeah.
who knows what they're doing, professional tree service. So shall we give her permission to prune deadwood, but to have it come from her contractor?
Yeah.
Yep.
Is there any limit on what type of contractor private property owners can use
We should
for?
probably,
Because wasn't that sweet gum on the sorority property a problem
yes,
because
yes,
an
that-
unlicensed contractor
that's so
was
politely
pruning
put,
it
yes.
without permission?
Yeah, that's true. We probably should say it should be a,
We want to make sure that they're paying into workers' compensation, that they're, you know, licensed with the state of Ohio to paying into workers' compensation, and that they can show proof of insurance. And that's not something, I don't know that's outlined in law or anything with the city, but that could just be a recommendation, or just to make, you know, we're covering our butts, and that protects her as well, because you know, anytime you invite a contractor onto your own private property, there's you know, you want to make sure that you got the insurance end covered. God forbid something did happen.
yeah.
So.
okay, I didn't mean to make it complex. I just wanted to know
Sorry.
where the line was
Yeah.
when you say, okay, we're not going to do it, but, you know, is it permission for them to do, that's all.
Does the city, do we license arborists?
No,
The city
we
don't?
don't.
Oh, okay. I
That's
get
interesting.
confused because some of the towns do.
Yeah, that might be something in the future to consider, but no, we don't. So, permission to remove is not granted, but permission to prune is granted.
Prune
with-
deadwood.
Prune deadwood with the services of a professional insured contractor.
In fairness, they did actually purchase some trees as part of the Nina project as well, some understory trees. So the idea would be to plant some shade-tolerant shrubbery to kind of, add to the stormwater
Yeah.
control it measures.
And this is a very responsible property owner, so this is, it'll be done well.
Mhm.
But removing the trees is not an option. So.
Okay.
All right, item 2 is the landscape ordinance issues, and the first item we have on the agenda is one that we won't, in truth, be looking at the plans for today, but Tom McGuire, who represents Campus Edge, will tell us about that.
Thank you. Good morning, Tom McGuire from Milestone Developments. We're going to postpone the landscape plan submission for today. As of last Friday, we've decided to join forces with the Edwards Companies of Columbus. As you may have read recently, the Edwards Companies is no longer involved in the landmark site. They've remained strongly interested in providing Athens with high-quality housing developments, and they feel they would have a better opportunity to do this with the Campus Edge project. We look forward to their involvement and expect to continue the process immediately. The Edwards Companies folks announced this privately to the mayor and a few other officials last week of their decision to proceed with us. So, please put it on hold. Also, I wanted to renew or re-extend my offer to take anyone who is interested on a tour of the site so that you folks are familiar with its present condition. And you can get a hold of me by telephone and schedule a time to be there at our mutual convenience. Thank you.
Very much, Tom.
Okay.
Do you want us to hold these plans, or do you want these to go with you?
Let me take them if that's okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
Good morning.
There's Tom McGuire. Tom McGuire of Milestone Edwards now. Our second item on the agenda is the Hampton Inn, and I see Jack Bortle is here. I hope you aren't suffering from. Okay, we have we've looked at these plans before, and this is a final plan for the area that's up at the top of the hill. The Hampton Inn is being built out on East State Street, and it is across from Lowe's. It's going to be, it's on a ramp of driveway entry behind Bennigan's. There's Elder German over to the east of us. And this is the final plans, and it's all one piece that fits together. Continuation. They have, we've looked at, there's a microphone that's suffering under there. So this is basically what they proposed before, with the changes that we suggested about plant trees here. They've taken all of our suggestions and incorporated them. There was one concern that Mark Whitney had about a really nice tree that they're using at the front called pink silver bell. They're keeping that despite Mark's concern that it might not survive in that situation, but it is interesting. It's this is one of the this is truly the most sophisticated landscape plan that we had seen in terms of design, materials.
Yeah, who did the landscape design?
Jack
Company that we use out of Zanesville called Timber Run Garden.
Timber
Oh, yeah.
Gardens.
That we built
Oh,
20
yes.
years ago, and they've done all of the landscape for us.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Timber Rich Gardens out of
Timber Run.
Zanesville.
Timber Run, is it? Or is that you, or?
It's Run.
Run,
Yeah,
okay.
Timber Run.
So this part of the plan is quite wonderful, and and especially since they took our suggestions. But it was awfully good to begin with. There is an area that they show down here, the entry area, which is that ramp, and that turns out to be a more difficult area to address. It's a steep slope, and I see that we don't have a proposal for that section yet, but you're hoping to do.
I think on there's, Steve Carter, who's the designer, he indicated that we would put trees in that ramp before he saw the site. He hasn't visually seen the site yet. And the reality is that, as you mentioned on the telephone, is that it's steep, it's gonna be hard to get trees on the side of that.
Yeah.
We'll do what we can to get, because it's important to us to have good curb appeal for the building as well. But with gravity being what it is, it's gonna be difficult to get the trees that are on a 3-to-1 slope, I think is what it is on the
Yeah.
side there.
Very severe.
Down towards the bottom, it's more, it'd be easier to put them down towards the bottom.
How much of the land adjacent to East State Street do you own, and would you be able to put trees onto?
Well, with the sidewalk we put in, I forget exactly what it is, but it's about 6 to 8 feet, but it's on the slope.
Yeah.
So there's the
Yeah.
road, the sidewalk, the lights, street lights on one side of it, and then the slope. Down, the pitch of the slope towards East State Street is better.
Mhm.
So we could actually put trees, along there, and there's gonna be a sign out front, which I don't think that he's picked up on yet, but we would obviously landscape around the sign as well.
And there is a way, Anne, I think, to plant trees on those slopes if
Oh,
you pick
yeah.
the right size tree. So
Yeah.
if you want to explain.
Oh, yeah, I mean, maintenance-wise in the long term too,
Yeah,
getting.
we wanna get something out there that's gonna hold the slope.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll take your suggestions. He hasn't seen it yet, and we wanted to see what the final grade was on that road. That's really the only way in and out of the property.
When do you expect him to come and look at the?
Probably sometime in the next month or so. He's not
Because
dead at the site yet.
Some of us may be able to accompany you
Yeah,
to the
we'd
site.
be happy to take any suggestions. As you see by the plan that we've used for the hotel, our business curb appeal means everything.
Mhm.
So we wanted to look
Okay.
inviting for the customer when they come.
Yeah.
And so that when we ask for a higher rate, they're willing to pay the higher rate. But we'd be willing to work with you on the entrance, but I gotta get him to the site to see it first.
Is he with Timber Run Garden?
Yeah, he owns Timber Run.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He's a good friend of mine. I think we've done 24 other hotel properties. He's done about 22 or 23 of them. So he usually is pretty easy to get along with, since I'm willing to pay whatever he charges. And it's a fairly expensive landscape plan for the property. He hasn't priced it out to me. We're doing one in Columbus, at the airport in Columbus right now. And we used to spend, when we opened the Americos, about $15,000 for landscaping. And now we're up to around $40,000. So it's a significant change. We'd be happy to let you know when Steve will be in town to look at the site. And then we'll work with you to do what needs to be done on the site, whatever makes sense.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
you would be happy to give him suggestions about how and what to plant on that site also, wouldn't you?
Yeah, sure, and I've worked with some of the workers at Timber Run, so
Okay.
I have no doubt that, there's gonna be a lot of opportunity, I think, to
Sure.
plant, so whatever I can do to help.
Okay. 'Cause on the site, he just mentioned that he'd plant these trees every 20 feet. I think it's on the plan that we gave back to him.
Yeah.
But he did that without seeing the site. So
Yeah.
I'll get him down here and then we'll arrange a time that we can walk.
We may wanna do maybe, more of a clustering of evergreens, again,
Right.
spreading plants that would grow in mass, or maybe even spread, so you don't have to weed whip it and mow
Right.
it and deal with it over
And we
time.
want ground cover we don't want to see any bare dirt on the side of the slopes.
Mhm.
Not only for us, but also for the landowners below us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, I haven't talked with the Bennigan's people what their plan is. I don't know if they've submitted their landscape plan yet.
We're waiting for that.
They have submitted one, but they've not responded to our concerns.
So, well, thank you very much, Jack. We will keep this for our records of the approval for this portion and await the contact and work
Okay.
with you on the
I'll
other
give you a
portion.
call when I finish out the actions. Okay?
Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Thanks so much.
The next item is the city soccer fields. Oops, sorry, yeah. Let's see, is this it right here, I think? And this is something that we went over, Emily and David and I went with Mike Knoll and Kevin Schwartzoff Mike Knoll is the architect doing this for the city, and Kevin Schwartzoff, of course, is the director of Parks and Recreation Community Center. And this is an area where there'll be 4 soccer fields. David, do you want to?
The area is to the rear of the Staples development on the Continental property. The access to it will be alongside the Aaron's, the furniture rental place, I think it is. There will be 4 full-size soccer fields. They're oriented to run sort of parallel to the river, which is over here. It does mean that there are, I think, 13 sweet gum trees that will have to be removed to accommodate them. However, we've been assured that there'll be a 2-for-1 replacement of these trees, and the proposal at the moment is to plant those replacement trees in groups along the river side of the soccer fields. And we're recommending that they consider putting in silver maples as the replacement species, because they will be rapidly growing and they will produce leaves that will evaporate, basically. And so they shouldn't be a leaf problem to the
Is
to the
this
site.
the bike path here?
The bike path runs along there.
Right.
Yeah, Lowe's is right here.
Yeah, Walmart is over there. So this is the large area of parking that's rarely used. And their access will be here. They're proposing various things along here, and we're hoping to encourage them to plant some trees along this
Along there.
side as well. But as this is the south side of the site, this is the obvious one to try and
Right.
put
Along the
trees
river.
onto. And they've picked the piece that will, if you look at the entire stretch along here, they've obviously picked a piece that's got easy access, but it's also got as few, it's got the least number of trees that are going to be impacted. So I think in that sense it's a good choice.
I have one question. I had been, I understood that there weren't to be a lot of trees along the river.
In the floodway.
The
that's what-
Conservancy are changing their opinion.
Oh, really?
The opinion now appears to be that trees are good for stability.
There's been a lot of research and, yeah.
I think the issue really is how you manage those trees, because I think they still do not want understory growth there, but they're going to want that area to be clear
Actually-
of material so it doesn't impede the flow of the water under flooding conditions. But you do want stuff there that's going to provide stability.
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of research, I mean, in light of massive flooding all over the world, essentially. But I think when you look at basal area, even undergrowth, they've really found that naturalized settings, even layered vegetation, does not impede floodwaters. I mean, if you've ever, I've actually been in floodwaters, and little hazelnut trees and shrubs and stuff really don't.
Well, I'm
and-
thinking of the honeysuckle bushes and that really dense stuff. I think that.
Yeah,
I'm
I
kind
think
of
that's
concerned
actually
about.
one of the goals, because any kind of just gradual slowing allows the groundwater to absorb the water and will keep that water from flooding downstream. So actually, I think from my just preliminary work with the Hocking Conservancy District, they're looking at not only planting trees, but creating no-mow areas and wild areas that really will absorb stormwater and won't be. I mean, and unfortunately, I think honeysuckle will probably seed in there. And, I just have one other suggestion for that site. Having planted trees there, and it's so compacted, and it's going to be a real challenge. I think silver maple is really progressive. I mean, a really good plant. And I might suggest maybe pin oak as well to mix in there.
The concern of the pin oak is the leaf problems that you'll get in the spring.
Oh.
those leaves don't break down.
No, they
easily.
don't.
Yeah.
So yes, if they're not too close to the fields, then yes.
Yeah,
But otherwise, you need to be careful about how close you bring them to the fields.
Yeah. It's just such a good shade tree and such a tough,
Yes.
tough,
Oh yeah,
long-lived.
yeah. I mean, the pin oak was one that we thought of, and then we thought leaf problems.
But they'll be mowing by then too. I would say that they'll mow those, but
Yes.
you're right, they do tend to drop leaves in the spring.
Yeah, yeah. But the pin oak was a second choice.
They also are thinking of this as an area that would provide shade for spectators.
Yeah.
And those low limbs of the pin oak, if they were the closest trees to the field, might not work so well.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, we'd have to bring them left alone.
I would say silver maple thrive on neglect down there,
Well, they're a river bottom tree. So
Yeah, that's great.
They should
That's
do
great.
well there.
And one of the fastest growing trees, and one that is not practical for many areas in the city too.
Yeah, we'll get big dramatic trees,
Yeah.
cheap and fast. This is really
Yeah.
nice. So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
good job,
this
you
is the
guys.
silver- You're gonna stick with the.
Silver maple.
silver maple.
Yeah.
Everybody comfortable with that? So that's our recommendation, and, Ron, do you want to take this, can we give this plan to you to hold, for the moment, we'll get this back to Kevin, but this is a, nice development. Thank you very much.
And there will be approximately 13 trees removed
Yeah. So there'll
For
be
the
approximately 26 planted.
and 26 planted.
Yeah, and I think Kevin said that this may, it depends on budget and how the bids came in. So this is something that may or may not happen shortly, or it may take a little while for funding.
We recommended that they didn't plant before the fall anyway.
So that is the recommendation. Silver
Is that a-
maples planted in the fall.
That sounds good. So the trees will be planted as part of the construction project? I mean, this won't come out of tree commission budget money?
This is city.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's called tree commission, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be the end of our budget.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So-
That's great.
Okay, well, the next, are there any other questions on the soccer field things? Okay. The next one is the CVS pharmacy, and I think that's over there where we can crinkle all over the microphones again. Thank you. You did ask me. Okay. This is a site that is on East State Street, just east of the Route 33 bypass as it enters onto East State. And this is the old county engineers depot and offices. And East Park Drive is here. That's East State Street running east. This is the beginning of the city community center rec grounds. The swimming pool, city pool is here. So that gives you an orientation. And there's more of this property that way and back this way. So there are, the property was bought by a developer who's going to have several things on the site. And this is the first thing we've seen in detail. Lee and I saw, Emily, were you with Lee? No. Lee and I saw this in its entirety as a very general proposal. And there are 5 things going in this spot, including a pharmacy, a bank, a restaurant, and then to the back, a hotel, a motel of some sort. And access is on East Park Drive. So this is the CVS Pharmacy proposed landscaping plan. Steve, do you want to say something about this for us?
As you'd mentioned, what you're seeing there is approximately 1 acre, or a little over an acre of a 4.5 acre site. Was purchased by Hanich and Knoll, or a different group. They're the major owners of the company, but it's a little different than Hanich and Knoll Architects. 4.5 acres total. It's being split into 4 lots. As mentioned, CVS is the first property that's going to be developed, and the city's looked very closely at other plans specific to that site. Jeff Albrecht is a representative of Hometown Development, which is the group that's actually purchased the property and is going to develop the pharmacy. So this is the first detail we've seen just on that one section. A lot of the plans associated with this development, including installation of new utilities, just as installed by others being Panich and Knoll or PND Development. So it's not real complicated, but there's layers of things going on, as you had mentioned. There are 3 lots that face East State Street. They have shared driveways, so there's 2 entrance points to come in. You're looking at the second entrance point, which will be closer to the existing signaled intersection at East Park Drive. There'll be another entrance drive back toward the off-ramp on the highway, where you can get off now. You can't get back on at the moment, but the off-ramp coming down to East State Street off 33. Just as you turn the corner, there'll be another entrance point right there that will go down between the bank and the restaurant. The developer for the whole project, Mr. Knoll, is proposing, and it has been approved, an additional drive lane. So now that you have 2 lanes going out East State Street, there'll be another lane over here on the right so people can get off to the side and turn down into this site without impeding the natural flow of traffic there right now. So there's a lot of different issues. The developer and the city have been working together on. This just happens to be the one piece that has to do with CVS in particular.
One question I got for you is in the landscape ordinance, we've got various rules about the borders of properties. Do we consider this to be the border of this property, or is it part of a contiguous property of which the border is just the outer perimeter?
Yeah, as I'd mentioned, the site's been divided and lots have been approved, 4 different lots. So that's a common property line there, and a technical or specific application of the landscape ordinance requires landscaping also along a drive aisle.
Yes. Okay.
If you look at, that was something that was added in the last revision, or last modification to the landscape ordinance, to also landscape those drive aisles. Same situation as with the Hampton Inn. They have a common property line with Bennigan's, and Bennigan's is proposing, the plan that we looked at had trees along their side, and so there's additional trees then that be required on the other side, on the Hampton side, on that 50-foot strip of land that goes back to actually where the hotel's located. So essentially they're asking, they're going to have to ask for a consolidation. The regulations say that if there are site constraints related to the strict application of the landscape ordinance, then a consolidation, or essentially a review and another approval by the tree commission is the appropriate way to handle it. If you look at the site right there, the size of I'm going to guess that that's probably a pretty standard footprint for a CVS pharmacy. As you can see, along East Park Drive, they have double loaded parking and they have to have width for drive aisle. So there's probably 60 feet from the building all the way across to the other side of the parking. Then they have the width of the building, and then you can see they have very little room left even to get that drive aisle in. So the width of the lot, the amount of parking that's required, they're a little over what they need on their parking requirement, but not by much. And so just the width of the lot, the width of the building, the amount of space required for drive aisles and parking, it'd be nice if the lot was another 8 feet wider.
How do you calculate the number of parking spots for a development like this?
The zoning code, 2311, Table B, off-street parking requirements, has a square footage requirement or a guideline for different types of uses. And this particular use would be described as a retail use, and then you take the amount of square footage in the building and divide it by a given number. It depends on the size of the facility, and in this case I think it was 1 parking spot for every 300 square feet of area in the building. So I want to say that they needed 59 parking spots and they had 63, or That's just off the top of my head. Again, that's another review that was done at a
The reason that that's
different time.
important to us is that if we do get into debates about consolidation and finding spaces, we may have to push up against the number of parking spots that they've got there.
When Alvy and I walked it with Mr. Knoll a while back, when he was inquiring about what might be our issues and stuff, the perimeter was one of the things that the way they were planning, I mean, it was so crammed in that it sounded to me, and I may be mistaken on this, but they were kind of counting on the park to be their green perimeter, you know, and I, especially with, I think, the design that they had been considering at that time with a little bit of a window on the back side of the hotel. And I just think from the, you know, if we can at the forefront of this, make sure that at least there's a buffer around the outer perimeter. I mean, if that was already an issue,
Well,
there's no way there's gonna be a buffer on the interior.
The property
areas.
owner on a property where there's more than 100 feet of right-of-way is allowed to use that right-of-way. Is that
Yes, that's
I got
right.
that right, Steve?
That is correct.
I think so, and as we discussed a little earlier, the building could be shifted to the east to create additional space, but I don't think it would be enough to create a green buffer between the lots. But they could shift it over, use the right-of-way. They're showing actually an 8-foot strip along East Park Drive for their plantings, and because the regulations say if you have 100 feet or in excess of 100 feet of frontage on a right-of-way, you can use that right-of-way if there is green area there for your planting. So they could shift the whole thing over just a little bit, another 8 feet, and still have the same effect and make traffic flow a little better, I think, between the bank and the pharmacy. It's going to be kind of a crowded, shared traffic area right there. But again, it has to do with the site itself. You'd think that you take 4.5 acres and divide it into 4 portions and it would work well, but it ends up being a pretty tight site for 4 different uses.
Is it helpful? My concern is that, you know, like when you look at one project that we'll be looking at 4 different plans.
Mhm.
My concern is that if, for example, the hotel is the last one, you know, and it's going to be wedged in, I think at that stage it might be too late to kind of, you know, that we will end up not having those buffers that we like to see. I mean, is there a way to make sure that we're all on the same page before?
I
Or
can
maybe you guys are already and I just haven't followed up.
I can get you another sheet that shows the overall site plan. The trouble is, you have 4 individual property owners.
Yeah.
Oak Hill Bank has purchased the center property, and you see bank on the side, I don't know if it says Oak Hill or not, but Oak Hill, on other plans that I have, it says Oak Hill Bank. The property that faces East State, most adjacent to the off-ramp of the highway, is indicated as being an Applebee's restaurant. And in the back, the latest plans I have just say Classic Accommodations is the hotel. But I do have an overall site, which shows the buildings and parking areas. So all those other areas indicated are non-parking, could be planting areas. So I can show you another whole plan. The trouble is, there's individual owners
Yeah.
on each one of these, just as, you know, at the Hampton site, there's 3 different owners. There's Bennigan's, Hampton, and then who knows who will be on that other site right there. To get them all coordinated at one time means cooperation or contact between each of those groups. Sometimes that's not real easy to accommodate when one, for example, in this case, CVS is really pushing ahead. You'll see the CVS start under construction fairly quickly. Those other 3 uses, there's no telling when they might start. See, that's the problem. And just because of the amount of activity going on, heavy trucks, those kinds of things, to try to get, you know, all the curbs in and the plantings in and have it all organized compared to the different development that'll be going on over an extended period of time, it's really going to be, I mean, it's difficult to coordinate all of that.
Mayor, I suggest that we ask Steve to provide us with that
overall site plan.
overall site map before we make any decision about this. And we will look at this in a committee setting to do some analysis about this site, but we really need to see the whole thing, and perhaps we could impose some guidelines that might help smooth the process and make sure that there are buffers.
And the other thing is, as we've only just seen this plan, we do need to sit down and figure out what is the total requirement of this as a single site anyway.
I can give you that information on the parking,
Okay.
what's required and what's provided. I think you're right, though, Ann. If you look at it right now, you can get an overall picture, because each one of these properties more than likely will have to come in for a review for consolidation. And so if you have an overall idea to begin with, even though it's specifically going to apply to this site, it's an idea or a theory or an overall view that will carry over the whole site. So I can't provide you with enough
It was very helpful when Mike Knoll took us around to see the site, but getting down to specifics like this really makes it more necessary to have that coherent framework.
Well, and I think,
It's all right.
When we spoke with Mike Knoll, I was envisioning this as one project, and, just my understanding of the landscape code is that there are those perimeter requirements, and so I kept trying to mention that, and I'm not even sure that that I communicated that well, but now I'm seeing these are 4 separate projects, and by going by the code, they will have buffer, kind of like in Columbus, where they have those, which really, I think, accentuate the development and promote safety and kind of calming effect on the site to have those buffers between the 4.
Traffic
But
is going to be angry.
I
It's gonna be
guarantee
very
Mike-
difficult to do that.
Mike Knoll's not thinking about that right now, and that's a concern. Yeah, so we need to, he may not, that's a lot of space that they're gonna have to give up for, and I think it really is a good thing, but the sooner we communicate that, the better.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
No.
right? I mean, or are they thinking that? Maybe I'm wrong. Are they?
Well, Mr. Knoll is in charge of the overall development.
Yeah.
In these other meetings I've alluded to with the city, they have to install additional water lines, sewer lines, and storm sewer lines that will be, the storm sewer probably won't be maintained by the city, but there'll be new water and sewer laterals. I've already issued a demolition permit for the engineers building. Once that thing's gone, there'll be a lot of excavation and earth moving. Essentially, the whole front of the lot will be pushed to the back. And the plans show, actually, the CVS will be 6 feet lower than East State Street. So the whole lot will be sloping to the back.
Oh, okay.
That'll be exciting.
So,
Right.
Mr. Knoll's looking at it, to kind of to grade out the whole site and install the utilities and to divide the lots up into 4 different pieces. But as far as having an overall idea of what the landscaping's going to be, I don't
Glad you
think he's
told us
that
about
far
that,
along.
because we have to then be concerned about the soil setting for the trees as well.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
obviously this is going to be a highly disturbed site,
Yeah.
some of which they're going to go down quite a depth as well.
And I will say that was one of the things that Michael Knoll discussed with us, and he was really cognizant of the soil issues and addressing that, and we've actually provided him some information about structured soil and all that, but I still think the space, I know that I did not feel like that was addressed, especially the 4 separate sites, so that's gonna be a lot of space that they're gonna, that they're gonna have to give up.
Yeah. And there is an opportunity to actually get some coherency to the whole development. If you're, for example, if you're just looking at the whole perimeter, if, flowering crabapple is going to be the theme of the area, you'd want that to continue, say, just on the perimeter and let them do something different on their interior.
Right. This is-
It's an
that was great.
opportunity here to really coordinate 4 projects together to get a really nice overall look.
How close to the embankment for 33 does the property line get?
Very close to the toe of the slope. So that area now that's relatively flat and then it slopes up to the ramp, that's essentially the property line right there. Because I'm just picturing the contour lines in my head, and they were very close together, very steep along the
Because
ramp.
usually the state has a very wide right of way on it,
Right.
but that obviously isn't the case in that case, is it?
However, wherever the toe of that slope
Yeah,
is
yeah,
off the
I mean,
exit
that-
ramp is where the property line is.
It's probably 30 feet, I think.
Yeah.
But as I recall, the map that we saw was really close, like there were buildings and pavement like right up to that,
Yeah.
so.
Probably right now, if you go, I think there's a fence out there. As I recall, the engineers have a chain link fence that has slatting through it, so you can't see down in their service yard, and that's probably
And
right
when
where it's
our
at.
regulations say right of way, they would not include a state right of way for the inclusion of a landscape ordinance. We'd have to do all our landscaping within our
Well, that's,
property line and right of way.
I think there's an assumption in ours that it's city right of way,
Yes.
and ODOT right of way is a little bit different.
Yes.
But there is an opportunity there maybe to work with the Department of Transportation to do some additional things on that slope. And that would help loosen up some area too for the development.
Yeah, that might be one area for compromise maybe, but, but I still think that, I think there's gonna be some challenges, because I think it's really important. You know, I think there's an idea that because it's a park behind there, that, hey, we'll just use that. That's, you know, they were talking about putting windows out so you could see the park and everything, but I don't know that it's fair to allow, you know, the development to go right up to the edge of the park either. You know, I think that buffer, you know, I think we should toe the line on that one. And maybe we can say, oh, well, we can be more flexible on the ODOT side or something. Boy, that's going to be important, I think.
I guess just all the comments to say that there's a lot of different things to look into, and once I give you that overall site plan,
Yeah.
it might help for you to conceptualize what it might eventually look like when it's finished.
Okay, well, we will reserve this for our next
Okay.
meeting, which is Tuesday, June 20. We have a request to move something up in the agenda. Tricia is going to have to leave shortly for teaching, and she has two items on the agenda, certificates for students who helped on Mill Street plantings and Mill Street hawthorns.
Well, it's a certificate that could be used otherwise, and I had it put together and it could be amended, because just wanted to get approval on it, first of all, that we could have these available to use to give to people who are assisting us in some special ways in the community with the care and planting of trees. And I particularly wanted to give it to two households of students on Mill Street that have been real helpful. They've been watering, they assisted in planting. I went uptown on Saturday night, and a young lady ran up to me and said, "Aren't you the tree lady?" So, you know, they've really been involved, and I think they ought to be recognized and go away with a good feeling about Athens, appreciating their efforts. So that was the idea of this, and I wanted to get some approval of it. And then we could put it onto some nicer paper. And I also was going to try to have some sort of news, invite some news people out and get a picture of them with the tree and the certificate, and so we get a little coverage that way, if that would be all right.
Yeah, sounds good.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Great.
Candy, do we have some kind of seals of some sort that might be put on the certificate, city?
The mayor's secretary may have something.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
So that-
Yeah, it's a good idea.
That's a beautiful idea.
Yeah.
Tricia, as tree lady, you want to
Tree
sign
lady.
it?
There you go.
Just put Athens Shade Tree Commission.
Right, I felt the same way about that. And I put it commissioner, or maybe we should just say commission, and then whoever was providing it could sign it. It wouldn't necessarily have to be, but it could be Alvy if she was available, yeah.
Here's a copy for
And
Candy for a
does anyone else want to add any information to that?
I've seen
Format?
things where there'd be an image of a tree in the background.
Uh-huh. Right, that would be good. Okay, I'll see if I can get that to happen.
And you might
How
date
you
it.
do it, I do not know.
It's watermarks, they're really hard. That's a way, on your computer, go to watermarks.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it can be
Okay.
done in
All right.
Word. It's,
That's really nice.
I have a son that's good at that kind of stuff.
And you
Put it
might
up.
date it also, so the.
Yeah, there was a
your
date.
signature or something.
There's a date right.
Oh, there is.
Second right
To
there.
so-and-so on. And then the second item had to do with just reporting that hawthorns were planted at two sites on the street, on Mill Street, and that was the AEP, Nina, and third party going together and paying for the trees. And I was curious who we want the third party to be, because since they're on city right away, I have it's a little. I didn't approach the landowners, but I wondered whether we wanted to just pick it up since it was only $10 per tree.
I think our budget, that's about the size of our budget. So might we do the $20 from our budget for?
yeah. That's really good.
So, and I hope those trees will do well on the site.
How do they look?
They look, I think, pretty good. Yeah. They managed to survive Palmer Fest.
Were these trees put in during beautification day, is that it?
The day before that.
Okay.
It was a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, this is part of the Ohio University men's water polo team beautification day effort.
Yeah, and that happened the next day, yeah.
It would be nice if a couple of the bars on Court Street would adopt a tree instead of cutting them down.
Yes, yes. There are two spots on Court Street that do need trees.
3 now. There's the little dinky one that got cut down. It's about that high.
Or the one in front of the diner.
But it
Yeah,
still
in
wants
front
to
of the diner.
live.
That was our
It's
feeling.
trying.
I think we should, yeah, I don't know, maybe.
It's slow surviving. We should
If
do
it
that.
stays much longer, I'm gonna get one of those little gnomes. Around the tree.
Might be what they need for protection.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Well, thank you very much, Tricia,
Yeah,
for that, and especially for getting students involved in that fashion.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing as far as our city, and the beautification day as well. I heard about a place in another college town where over the 15 years that they've been doing Beautification Day, that they had something like 15,000 people, students and townspeople alike, get together and work on their Beautification Day. And it's just built up over the years. So, I mean, I don't know if we'll get there, but at least it was a very good start at making people aware and working together at some of our issues of beautification. And
Yeah, and civic responsibility
Mhm.
is something deeper. Thank you. Well, our next thing under the landscape ordinance issues is a leftover piece of business about 131 Mill Street, which was on our information for us. This is the, thank you very much, too much paper. This has a very long history, and we needed to know what it was we had suggested to the property owner here, Mr. Cody, in the first place, for these parking areas at the back.
One of these letters referred to six trees.
Okay, 6 trees along the Stewart Street side of the property have died or not been planted according to the requirements of the landscape ordinance. And we have looked at this site, several of us, and made suggestions about what kinds of trees should be put in there. Anne looked at the site and thought that Zelkovas might be appropriate. Hawthorns were also suggested.
You know, then I thought hornbeam. What about the upright hornbeams there? Just another, sorry. It's too late, don't.
Prestigious something or other, yes.
Yeah.
They definitely were there. I did look at the size of the tree pit that you've got available there, and it's greater than 30 square feet.
Okay.
So there's plenty of space there. I mean,
Yeah.
compared to what we're doing on Court Street.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
There is
yeah.
plenty of space. There's a little bit of interference in one of them because of a utility pole. But the other three out of 4 have got the...
And those aren't primary wires that are overhead either, right?
No, the ones
They're-
that are overhead are telephone
Yeah, so I don't-
cables, so they're not an issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I think our intent was with the 6 was that they might be medium-sized trees rather than full-size trees because of the limitations of the site.
Mhm.
Hawthorns would be a good possibility.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Would golden chain tree be a possibility also?
Yeah, anything that can get up, the challenge is that the sidewalk is right there. And
Yes.
these would be right up against, and it's a kind of a narrow sidewalk, a narrow road, but so anything that would be kind of the umbrella effect would work.
if you look at the very last drawing, that's what I think we...
Exhibit B here.
What we suggested was 2 larger trees closer to the house, and then the 4 smaller trees in the parking lot. I think the difficulty with the trees near the house is that they would probably have to be a fastigiate, because there isn't a lot of space there.
So like fastigiate white oak?
The English oak we planted
Or English oak,
on
yeah.
Norris Avenue is doing very well, so
Yeah.
that may be one that we recommend.
They stay really narrow. I mean, I've seen them that are old and they're maybe not even 10 feet across.
And then hawthorns for these small ones, but they should be. We mentioned 1.5 caliper. Really, a 2-inch caliper is the minimum.
Yeah.
Should
Depends,
be working with.
do you think? well, for, actually, Mark Whitney
It's
did
a
say that
tough
a
If
site
they're
like
gonna,
this.
if they're gonna survive, they need,
Yeah.
and it's a flat site, there's no reason why we shouldn't put 2-inch calipers in there.
Yeah, it'd be worth his investment.
And also getting trees, even these small trees, they should be planted with clear of branches to 6 feet. Because if they're not, they're going to be an attractive vandalism site.
Right, yeah, the tougher
You know, if
requirement
they,
because of.
if they just stick to the ASTM standard for trees, then they do it. I mean, it says 2-inch caliper and it says clear to 6 feet.
Wow.
And as I say, these pits are certainly big enough for trees of this type.
These plantings that would occur within 30 days, this is still okay time?
No.
Well, it'll probably be
We've
fall.
gone beyond that point,
Yeah,
and it's not being maintained. There were some trees planted in here, but they've been lost.
They were real little.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
I
part of
guess
the
my
problem.
question would be, let's say that he goes ahead and plants trees, and because it's late now,
Well,
these trees...
I think we should consider whether they should be planted now or whether they should be planted in the fall.
Point is, we want the trees to
We
be
want the trees
planted, and we
and
want them to
survive.
survive, and so to wait till appropriate time would be okay.
Yes.
Not to force somebody to go ahead and plant the trees with the risk of them dying because it's the wrong time.
Right.
Does he
Also, it
know
would
that?
give them a chance to order the trees because those fastigious trees might not be easily available, quickly available anyway.
Right.
They're more easily available because we.
And I think we should tell him that he should plan well ahead because he might have problems finding those quickly.
Yeah.
I doubt that he would realize that.
Right.
Are there any particular hawthorns that we have to recommend? Is there anything in the hawthorn?
Winter King.
There
It
are
only has
certain,
thorns and up in the crown, you know?
there are certain ones on the approved list. There are a lot of hawthorns that have more problems that should not be planted.
So
Winter
he
King
could,
has good longevity.
he could be given a list of appropriate, what we think would be appropriate trees, and he can then try to acquire them,
Yeah.
so that he still has a choice of what he wants to plant.
Because nurseries may or may not have the things.
Right.
But we should start with very clear, the best
Yeah, I think the
thing to
hawthorn
plant
is the best, and maybe give two alternatives for the hawthorn, and for the fastigious trees here, perhaps the English oak and the hornbeam is the other one.
Now, these trees that we do recommend, there are examples already in the city, so that somebody could
Mhm.
actually go and say,
Yes.
here's a tree that was
I wonder
planted.
if this Hawthorne's is good
Okay.
in the winter.
Well,
Does they have thorns in
I
the
gather
are, I think.
that the opinion is for the 131 Mill Street property that the 4 small trees required on the Stewart Street side be a first choice hawthorn of some kind, and Winter King is this likely selection, or a different kind of hawthorn that if and the 2 trees to the side of the house be fastigiate white oak, either English oak or possibly a fastigiate hornbeam. So
Those are little, though.
Did you say fastigiate white oak?
Yeah, no.
English oak.
Just English oak, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, that's my fault.
Pardon. I just
And
read
that's
it,
the one you
writing.
like better than
It is last for 40 years and they stay really narrow and you know they're not you know sometimes they get a little thick and scraggly and you know when they're 40 or who's not scraggly at 40 you know but you know, but
I'm doing okay.
yeah, I was referring to myself. But no, it's a good long-lived tree, and it would be low maintenance, you know, and it'd be a good, those would be good trees for that site. But he
What's-
needs to order them, you're right, order them now, contract with a landscaper now, and then,
Yeah,
you know,
and this is
plant
for a
them
fall
in the
planting,
plant.
and they
Yeah.
are to be 2-inch caliper with a 6-inch, pardon me, a 6-foot clear trunk, so that
Yeah.
Well,
it's
now-
branches up. and
That would
penetrate.
be for the trees in the parking lot. Would you want the 6-foot, Ann? Would
What's
you
that?
want the 6-foot clearance on the fastigiate oak?
Yeah, I'm probably not gonna get that.
No.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
that should be, I don't even know if that needs to be
That's why we got
stated. I
tree
think
people.
that if you're getting 2-inch caliper hawthorns, they're going to be.
Supposed to be yeah, I mean, if
Yeah,
if they're grown to the standard, they will
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, so I don't know that you have to, if they're 2-inch caliper from a reputable nursery, they're already going to be limbed up.
Okay.
You probably don't need to state that.
Yeah.
That'll just probably make him more nervous, you know? that-
Yeah. And this has to do with this being potentially a very difficult site for these trees to survive, and so we're suggesting things that produce a tough tree that can take various kinds of abuse and that will survive the site and other things going on there.
The, I hesitate to do this, but for those large trees, would linden be another alternative? Because it doesn't tend to spread too much.
Yeah, it depends on the cultivars, as long as it wasn't the straight species. You know, if he went with Corinthian linden, is a real small, tidy linden. What's the other one? Little
Little leaf linden?
yeah, that, I don't know the, I think, is there a green column little leaf linden? I don't
I
know.
don't know.
But I hate to complicate it
Yeah.
for him,
this
but
is,
any of the little leaf lindens would be, I think, okay.
Well, I'll draft something to give to you and.
And so in terms of time constraint, we'd say that they need to be planted in the fall planting season by December 1st.
What do you think,
I mean,
Emily?
what's, because, you know,
Yeah, I would say
I think we need to give them a
December 1st.
deadline.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
Maybe we
that's-
should say earlier, just to like, so we're not stuck again, you know, if.
November 15th?
Let's say December 1st, that's when we're planting.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and are we giving him a beginning time when it would be good to plant? Because,
Fall.
Probably no earlier than August, October 1st,
Yeah,
I
that's
think.
what
If he's working with a reputable
Yeah, that's-
landscaper, that should not be a problem.
Yeah, so let's
We
October
don't
1 to
know.
December 1. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Candy, for bringing in that. Okay, there is one I just jumped over here. I'm sorry, it's a bifocal error. They're getting to be more of them all the time. There is a cell phone tower on city property, very close to the city sewage water treatment plant at the end of East Park Drive, I guess that would be. And it has it's just brand new. It has fresh
Saw that.
gravel in it, shining huge flagpole there, and there are 13, there's a cyclone fence around it, and 13 or 14 very petite spruce, I think they are.
They're 2-foot-high blue spruces. And if you compare them to what was planted behind Staples, it's 8-foot-high blue spruces. It's a bit of a joke, quite honestly.
Yeah,
I don't know who
They're
did
cute,
that.
but
Are they
they're,
alive? Are they?
Oh, they're alive, but it's going to be a long time before they do anything for that.
Oh,
for
more
that
gnomes.
family.
The gnome patrol.
has potential. Well, so, Steve, can you illuminate?
When I saw this item on the agenda, I emailed the chair to ask
Yes.
if I could investigate some specifics related to this development. And SiteQuest was the name of the company that Mike Pitcher was their representative. He's located in Akron, Ohio. And the Board of Zoning Appeals had to consider this case because all cellular phone towers or any kind of utility installation, the code says is a conditionally permitted use. Mr. Pitcher Representative SiteQuest made an original presentation to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and they delayed their decision for up to 60 days. They're allowed to do that. One of the reasons they delayed it was they were concerned about the landscaping, because it just says around cell phone towers, around the utility building, there has to be a fence and it has to be screened, as all the zoning code said. So they were looking for some input from the Tree Commission about what would be appropriate to plant around there. And the developer was agreeable to that. So I found that in the record. And I looked at the minutes of the next meeting a month later, and it said that Mr. Pitcher, did appear at that meeting, and he said that he would agree to abide by the recommendation of the Tree Commission. And in the minutes, it seems to indicate spruce or,
Arborvitae?
well, see, that's what they didn't want to, plant. Because a couple of the board members, I saw in the minutes, had made mention that around the sewage treatment plant that there were some pines. or something other than arborvitae that was planted around there, and they wanted to know if maybe that would be nicer to have there. So somehow, in the middle, between that original review of the Board of Zoning Appeals and their final approval, which also included a condition contingent upon installation of plantings as recommended by the Athens Tree Commission, I can't find what was recommended by the Tree Commission in the middle in the record. And I'd ask Candy to look in the file, in your file, and see if there was anything. So I'm not sure what to tell the developer because I can't find what he was told or what he agreed to. The minutes seem to indicate that there was agreement, that somehow or other the zoning board knew what had been recommended, the developer understood it, but I can't find the actual written record.
I went back through my emails, and I did find something for a previous cell phone tower that was over by
It was the one over by University Commons where the Board of Zoning Appeals had actually, in that requirement, they had put on a condition that they wanted 20-foot high, I'm not sure if they wanted spruce or what they wanted, 20 feet at planting. And I had come back to the Tree Commission and asked, because I doubted the survivability of that large of a planting, and so had Mr. Pitcher, he was the one that represented Altel in that location of that one too. That was a subsequent
recommendation from that side.
Yeah, so that was one.
Maybe
where-
that's why.
Yeah. So and as I said, as I went back through the record, I just couldn't find anything. Everybody had agreed to it, said it was fine, so I don't know if it's, if the Tree Commission recommendation was for a certain height, certain species, certain spacing. All I know is that there was concern about, because I think that was one of the things too that the Board of Zoning Appeals was concerned about at the second site. They wanted essentially, the reason they said that was they wanted immediate screen. At planting, the whole thing would be screened off. In this case, I don't know if there was a consideration that over time it would...
It'll take a generation.
Yes.
It will be 25 or 30 years before that is a cyclone fence with a screen of everything.
So if you can investigate that further, we'd appreciate it because something needs to be done in terms of better planting.
Well, as I said, I looked through my records and I've gone through, asked Andy to look through your records, and I can't find anything in writing that was recommended. Evidently something was. They went out there and they did plant.
Right. That's,
Do you have a date of this? Do they have a record, video record of this meeting? The government channel? No? Oh, okay.
That I don't know about.
Okay. Just
Records retention, I was just talking to Scott about it. He might be interested in this. Records retention schedule for public meetings is 90 days. So there is the possibility to free up hard space for the government channel for the keeping of a record of these meetings. This recorded document could disappear in 3 months. They keep them longer than that, but once they run out of hard drive space, they have to prune it back. Excuse me for that. Prune it back a little bit.
Get that date,
And
yeah.
but again, that's on the records retention schedule. It says these meetings can essentially, unless there's pending litigation involved. So some council meetings have to be kept, some Board of Zoning Appeal. For example, Board of Zoning Appeals, you have a 30-day window to appeal denial. So they'd have to keep those for at least 30 additional days. So I'll investigate that with Scott and the guys at the government channel and see maybe if they do have a record of it before that goes away. But it's been quite a while.
Okay.
But I'll see if I can find it.
I don't know about the legal niceties, but they are supposed to have screening, and 2-foot trees are not going to provide adequate screening in a reasonable length of time. The species should be fine.
Another thing that I can do too, and I thought about this yesterday when I was trying to put everything together, I could call Mr. Pitcher and he might actually have something in writing that he received, because he seemed very agreeable to the recommendation of the Tree Commission. How that was relayed to him, it must have been somehow in writing. For some reason, I just don't have it in my records. And
When, do you know when this was? I mean,
Mhm.
we could... what's
sure,
the-
I have it
what's
pinned
the
down. I
date?
know, I forget the dates right off the top of my head. It's just about a year ago, a little over a year. There was an initial meeting, the Board of Zoning Appeals. They meet every second Tuesday, the second Tuesday of every month.
If you can get a little maybe closer on the date. I mean, I try to keep my emails, maybe there was some sort of email communication or something
That could be, you know.
but we would have
something that
never
casual.
recommended 2-foot trees. I mean, that's,
Yeah, it
but
would-
maybe we didn't recommend, but there's general standards that we use, so somehow that must not have got communicated.
What I can do, I can just email you the dates of the zoning board meeting, and obviously from reading the minutes of the, there was this question about what would be appropriate screening. Let's use, the board says, let's use the tree commission expertise to try to get something a little different, maybe to match up what's already existing in the area. Then there seems to be at the next meeting, 30 days later, an understanding and an agreement.
Yes. Yeah.
What everybody agreed to just
Well, certainly
disappeared in the center, but I can
the-
email you and give you
The
the dates.
sewage work plantings are all spruce, I think, aren't they, in that area? So it would be logical perhaps to plant spruce, but you'd have to plant them at 8 feet, not at 2 feet.
Yeah, he could rectify this by simply planting something that has a reasonable chance of screening.
So I'll do a little more research, I'll get a hold of Mr. Pitcher, and I'll email you and give you the...
Yeah, because I could
Give
see
you the
where
date.
maybe you just emailed me and he said, oh.
You may have
it's
contacted
good.
Mr.
Yeah.
Pitcher directly, I mean, but I...
Anyway, at the moment, he believes he's in compliance.
I would, well, that's why I'm kind of qualifying everything that I'm saying and actually looking for a written record, because I believe he thinks he's in compliance with
Right.
whatever was recommended.
That does
I don't,
make sense.
it's in such an obvious place and such a highly visible place that, he wouldn't, I wouldn't think want to jeopardize his conditional use permit, because of some plantings.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Thank you for emailing in advance, too. Let's see, we have another item here, item 3. We're going back to the letter to Continental Real Estate about dead trees on the bike path. And did people get the email I sent out on that?
I didn't.
No,
Sorry.
yeah, your email bounces me back.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that, God.
Let's see, Tricia?
Thank you.
So, this is a letter regarding a large series of dead evergreens that turned out to be junipers, I think, when we went to look at them, behind us, starting at the
Yeah.
westernmost point, probably midland of the Petland Staples building.
Aaron's.
Aaron's, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, thank you.
Because that's what the very first, that's in fact where there is a blue spruce that's died.
That's right, there is one.
And then it's junipers, I think, all the way down.
That's exactly it. One dead spruce at that point, and then 32 blue junipers that are dead from that point on. Lowe's is taking care of replanting 20 or 22 of those that are immediately behind them. And this is a letter that we propose to send to Continental Real Estate Companies. And Paul Eschenbacher of Code Enforcement got the contact information for us about this. A large number of trees planted by Continental Real Estate Companies along the city bike path behind our stores died. And, yeah, okay. So starting from Aaron's and going to Petland Staples. And these plantings include 12 junipers, 1 blue spruce. There are several more deciduous trees in serious decline. And one of the more distressing things about this is whoever planted the trees left all the root cage materials
Can I
on.
suggest you put that in bold?
Yeah.
In the letter, because I mean, that was really a serious
Yeah,
omission. I mean, it's causing them cost, because
Yes.
they didn't do the job properly in the first place.
Right, and this was something noted by one of the people from Lowe's who is working on replacing their things. They dug it out and said, you know, look at, here's the
Oh,
dead
look,
body.
this is how it was shipped.
This is how, yeah.
So say this again, when they planted them, whoever planted them originally didn't plant them correctly, and what, then,
Well, they left this cage that's there to, and the...
The shipping, you know, the thing that these things are used, they're shipped this way, but generally speaking, you want to take away all that material when you plant the...
so this, yeah, and so that's really the reason the trees died, is that they just weren't planted properly.
It was
Yes.
very...
And so you're getting into this issue again of having people, you know, they can comply. We can say plant spruce, and they plant a 2-inch spruce. We want an 8-foot. We can get people that'll plant, and then somebody comes along and plants the 8-foot spruce and doesn't do the right job of planting, or piles up things around the root. So you get into these kinds of
Well, they're still responsible for
Yeah.
keeping live trees there.
That's right,
Yeah.
and so what's necessary is they have to hire competent people that know
Yes.
how to plant trees.
That's what they're going to do.
Right.
And that is the truth, yes. Absolutely. So, the city's Shade Tree Commission asks that the dead and dying trees be replaced to satisfy the requirement for replacing city trees that were removed from that area for development. That was one of the things that happened. And we include in the letter information that Lowe's is doing really a lion's share of this down at their end. And the specific site locations for this. Steve, is this more appropriate to come straight from the Tree Commission, or ought it come from code enforcement? We have it. And we should say something about when we
Sure.
want.
I'm thinking that the original agreement between Continental Properties and the City of Athens had to do with the bike path.
Yes.
And I'm not sure what office generated, that review and was involved. I wasn't involved in that.
Okay, well, then it should come from us, and we probably should say,
Well, I think we
please
should put
reply
within
Yeah, you wrote that down in this
within
copy right here.
30 days.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think I got your original.
Yeah, you got
You did.
Yeah, as I recall, there were discussions. Jeff Maiden was the city engineer for the bike path property. I think Jeff's the one that designed the landscaping around the new soccer fields, and he was involved in that project as the city's contract engineer on that. So it wasn't handled through my office.
Yeah, okay.
So I think it'd be appropriate for the tree commission. It's plantings on the right-of-way, right, or in association
Yeah.
with right-of-way acquisition and disposition, because there was a lot of legal back and forth that had to do with clearing title on that railroad property.
Well, I think it's also that property came under the landscape regulations, and those trees are there because of a requirement for planting in that, is it the second phase or the third phase of the continental development?
Phase 2 was, the Staples phase, was subject to the requirements. However, we may not have had that drive aisle requirement at that time.
Yeah. I think-
Because they have a vehicle access route at the back of that property, and I
Right.
think that's where where that tree requirement comes
Yeah.
from.
And I'm not sure if their construction was just after the initial passing of the landscape ordinance, because Walmart was not.
That's right.
Walmart was built before the ordinance, so,
That's
we're talking about fairly new regulations. It took about another year and a half, I think, for that the first revision that included buffering and landscaping along drive aisles. Staples started not too long after Walmart was completed. So there may have been a window in there when they weren't required, but they were an agreement or a compromise for the installation of the bike path. In any case, there are trees there that have agreed to be planted and should be
Yes, maintained.
kept alive.
Right. I think there were even trees that were marked to be kept, and then suddenly were just taken down. And that might have been in this area.
Right, there was,
In terms of a deadline, 30 days for them to give us a plan, which would be, I think, to plant trees in the fall planting season. So that,
Yeah.
you can frame your
Okay.
requirement for a 30-day response, indicating how that they're going to plan to replace these in
All
the
right.
fall time, because we don't want them to start planting now.
No.
And maybe recommend them to get a different planter.
Whoever did this before, you don't want to go.
Don't use me. Get those to do it for you.
That's
That's because there's a warranty on those trees, and they're gonna get the trees for free.
That's true. I might copy it. Well, we probably should copy this to Lowe's.
Yeah.
And, yeah, not a bad idea. Thank you very much.
when you're talking
Yeah,
about
that's
competent installation, just so you know, we are getting a little closer to registration of all contractors that work in the city of Athens and home occupations. I'm working with the auditor's office. So that's a project that I started to work on. I've been working with the auditor on it. We license or register plumbers and electricians in town, but no other trades. And there's been some discussion about, is there the possibility that we're missing out on, the way we're looking at it is income tax. Not necessarily the competency of the contractor, but just the fact that we have them registered. And so that way the income tax department knows that this particular company, contractor, home occupation exists and should be
And so
paying
if they
income
do
tax.
work within the city and they get
Right, so we-
paid for that, they would be subject to Athens city income tax.
Right,
Yeah.
and then we'll have, it's a little hard to get information back out of the income tax department. Once it's in there, it's kind of like going to the FBI vault or something like that. But at least there will be a record, we'll know a contact person, and we'll have some idea if they're paying matching Social Security, income tax, we'll be paying income tax, workman's comp, those kinds of things. So it won't be a full-blown, approved, let's say, landscaper,
But they have
or
insurance.
arborist, but we'll have some indication of the business name, the business location, a contact person, and some indication of at least the legitimacy of the business paying into the city income tax system. So we're getting a little closer. And so, for example, you shouldn't have just, these guys in an old pickup truck coming to town and say they're landscapers, as an example. Well, there'll be, anybody that comes to town to do that kind of work will have to be registered with the city and paying city income tax. So
Thank you. That's-
we're getting closer. We're not all the way there to say whether you're an approved arborist or approved landscaper, but making some progress.
It's a good step. Thank you very much. We have something that we probably should just move to the bottom and something to move to the top on the agenda at this point. The High Street area, there's going to be some work done shortly, I guess. And probably, are there trees that might be...
Yeah, could we get a copy of the plans? Because I've driven the site, and there's all sorts of questions I've got, but the easiest way to answer them is to have a look at what your plans are in terms of what you're proposing to do. So if you could get Alfie a copy, and we can sit down and have a look
We'll have
at it.
a brief meeting. And there might be places where potentially there could be trees planted, conceivably.
Talking about the far end of High Street?
High
Well,
Street...
we don't know what the plan is. I mean, it's just there's a block.
Project encompasses all the sidewalks and pavement and curb replacement on High Street as part of issue 2 road.
And it takes in West Washington and...
Parts of Washington, parts of Munster.
Yeah, yeah.
Just for your information, too, along most of High Street, its entire length, the right-of-way is right up against the face of the building.
You mean the east, the residential or the school? We're talking about?
I'm talking about the residential area. I'm
Okay.
not sure, for example, where the right-of-way line is up against the school because it's fairly open. But I know, having done some work in the third or the furthest north block of Lancaster, High Street, that the city right-of-way goes from the face of the buildings to the face of the building. So all of their front yard is really city right-of-way.
Really?
There was, it looks from the tax plats that there was some adjustment at some point in time because the city vacated some right-of-way. I'm going to say what probably ended up happening is they realized that people had, based on previous information, constructed their homes on the right-of-way. So they vacated part of the street. So when you see that amount of area that was vacated, and you kind of try to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and you go out and measure it, you go, oh, look what's left over. It's the distance from the face of this building to the other side of the street and the face of that building. So...
There are a lot of good planting sites.
So basically, up through there, if it doesn't have a building on it, it's in the right-of-way.
Well, it's just that whenever they're doing sidewalk repairs like this, that it's an opportunity for us to look and see what planting sites could become about.
This was I think this is CDBG project, right, Ron?
Issue 2, is it?
Issue 2?
Well, might I just suggest, use this, another whole, but, trees can be considered part of infrastructure and capital improvements and can be included in issue 2 projects. I know that those monies are hard sought after or whatever, but, 1% of the cost could line the whole street with trees. Do, bare root, 2-inch caliper, red maples could really be
We had started looking at this project about a year ago. Andy Stone was still here, and I remember walking the entire length of the project with him. And one of the concerns we had, and I think Ron had expressed it at the same time too, was on the sidewalk installation, what kind of problems are we going to end up with when we're coming up against trees? That was one of the considerations.
New
because we
trees
had
or old
old trees. Because we had, we had utility water, storm, curb boxes, we had valves, we had all kinds of things, and trees was one of the considerations. Unfortunately, the project was planned, but wasn't started last year.
Didn't have the
So-
money, I don't think, for the year.
So I know that was one of the concerns, because there are several large trees in this area, and we don't want to go through and replace a sidewalk and not look at all these other issues, curb, gutter, water, sewer, and trees is one of them too, so. Want to keep what's there. If we have to curve a sidewalk,
Yeah,
or,
that's-
and, how much can you, I don't know, can you shave the top of the root of a tree to get a sidewalk rather than go around it? So some of this might get very specific. But we want to get pieces of the whole picture together before the project kicks off.
Well, the city has done some curved sidewalks, at least in one place I see regularly by the library.
Yeah, and they did the same thing on Ohio as well.
On Ohio, too. Yeah.
I do think it's a real,
You had to be pretty creative on that.
Yeah, that's a nice sidewalk.
but
Ron?
we do want to make sure that we don't cut roots, because if the tree would fall over,
Yeah.
there's some issue,
Yeah.
liability issues there.
I'll give it to you, I'll give it.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to address?
No, it's not.
Okay. Very good. Well, we have done everything on the agenda except for the resident concerns about AEP line clearance things. We have a resident who may show up a little later, but I think we may be adjourned before he comes. The concern is all from one location where AEP is doing utility line clearance, and Elahu Ghazni of 20 Fairview had several trees on his property cut back severely for clearance of lines that run from, this is a steep slope that goes from Fairview Fort down to Grosvenor. And there are those wooden stairs, the CCC stairs, in that site too. I noticed when I was up there the other day that there are two big
Spools there, I noticed that
spools.
they're doing something.
Yeah, big orange spools for looks like new line might be being installed in that slope, or perhaps on Forest. There's also work scheduled. There are pruning blazes on a lot of trees on Forest, which looks to be a street that has not had any utility line clearance work done on it up to this point, perhaps. And so there are, for the resident at 24 and 28 Forest, that is actually one property owner, there are 14 trees in that couple's yards that are blazed, and that's a concern. This may be Mr. Gosney.
Yeah, it is.
So the
talked
resident,
about it.
Elahu, you have come just in time. So you have a fellow resident up in your neighborhood, Tom Carpenter, who's also concerned about pruning in the area, and he has 14 trees in his property, their property, that are scheduled for some kind of pruning. Elahu, would you like to say something?
Sure, yeah.
Just step to the podium, please.
Say who you are and where you live.
Yes, give us your name and address, please.
My name is Elahu Gosney. My address is 20 Fairview Avenue here in Athens. It was, I guess, late February when they first started trimming in that neighborhood. I live right next to a set of stairs that's a public right-of-way, and my property adjoins going down the hill there. And basically what they did, I wasn't notified at all, first of all, and they came in and they just removed a lot of trees that were 15 years old, 20 years old. One was 35 years old. They weren't underneath the lines. They were on the side, pretty good distance away. I mean, I'm not an arborist or anything like that, but it seems to me the standards are remove branches within 10 feet of the lines, or remove branches that would grow to the lines within 4 years, somewhere around there, but they're not respecting those standards at all. I spoke with someone in Tulsa last night, actually, and he makes me pretty optimistic because AEP was doing similar stuff in Tulsa, and they came to an agreement with the company, and there are 5 main points to the agreement. And one is that before any trimming is done, AEP is required to come up with a plan and tell the property owner exactly what they want to trim or remove, and it actually has to be agreed to by the property owner beforehand. The second part of the agreement that they have is that it has to be done at a time when the property owner is able to be present. So they set up a time, Friday between 10 and noon or something like that. And the third is that the property owners are actually able to hire their own arborist if they choose. And in some places there's a bit of compensation for that, not full compensation, but a little bit. And then the fourth point on there is that any tree or shrub that's removed, they're given a voucher to replace. I'm pretty sure it's a full voucher, but he didn't have the exact details when I spoke with him. And then the last thing is that there's a committee. If the property owner says you can't cut this tree, and AEP says we have to, there's a committee that has both AEP members on it and community members, and it actually is able to sort of arbitrate and mediate. So it's the same company, it's a different branch of the company, and they might be resistant, but and I'm not sure it's something that you guys can actually work for. I'm probably pretty sure it's not, but I think it's something that people in the community might be able to work for.
How do we get more information on this 5-point agreement?
I just spoke with him for the first time yesterday, actually.
Is he an employee of?
He's a community activist in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I'm going to be in touch with him more, find out the details of exactly how they were able to work that out. But it's nice that AEP was willing to pay for 50% of some trees on the east side, but it's not stopping them from coming somewhere else and doing the same thing. And to me, it's not acceptable for them to just come in and have free range to clear cut certain portions of property, and there has to be a better way for them to maintain service without destroying all these trees.
Wow. So,
It's an interesting, it's quite interesting because if this is enforced in Tulsa, it makes the expense of having lines running much more expensive for them to maintain the lines, to go through this much difficulty in trying to trim the trees, that buried lines then become an alternate, a more economic,
far more attractive.
far more.
If I could butt in, actually they are burying some lines there as well,
Oh, yeah.
at AEP's cost, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things we need to be aware of is that the franchise that covers AEP, or the ordinance that covers AEP is up for renewal, I think, in 2011. But one question has been raised as to why should we wait until 2011 to actually change that ordinance, or we certainly shouldn't wait to 2011 to actually prepare a replacement for that ordinance.
Yeah.
And so we need to ask Paul what he thinks we should be doing.
Well, probably the first thing I'd do is see if we can break that agreement previous to 2011. So I guess that's the thing to do, is go ask the law director. I'm writing down a task here. Contact the law director and see if we can do that, rearrange that, or renegotiate that, I guess is the question. That would be the first thing to do, and then of course do another ordinance. I had a copy of it. I think I've lost a copy somewhere in my notes, but I know I did get a copy of the, as you say, the 2011 ordinance, the one that takes us out to that time period. The next thing, of course, is when we renegotiate is what things we want in there.
Yes.
These 5 points are a starting point at least. Right now, is there a process actually to stop somebody from losing their blue marked trees on forest? I mean, short of contacting AEP?
The only way is to contact Steve Stanley,
Yes.
as far as I know, at AEP, and try and
and-
negotiate with him.
Okay.
Elahu had some contact with Steve Stanley, and the property owner at 24 and 28, Professor Carpenter, is doing that today. He was going out and measuring distances first before he went to talk.
I'm speaking with the people with WOUB tonight, in part, in light of the Nina project, to try to be positive about it, but maybe this is an opportunity. I've given them your name and phone number, Albie, as well as Steve Stanley's, but maybe, is there anything that I can communicate to further our goals, or, this might be an opportunity, might get on I don't think anybody watches TV that time of day, but sometimes it's covered on the radio later the next day, and maybe I can say some things about
Well,
What do you guys want me to do?
one of the ideas I think we have to look at is requiring them to prune to the International Society of Arborists standards.
Okay.
And where they don't, we're going to have to go in, remediate that, and charge them for it.
Okay,
I mean-
fix the pruning and then
And then if they don't do it to that standard, which they claim they do anyway, but if we, we can bring in arborists who are qualified
Well-
and say that isn't it,
Well, just
and you're gonna have to do
take
it.
a whole bunch of photographs
Yes,
of
I
all
mean,
the trees they've done,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and also where a large shade, I think the other thing that should be put in there is when a large shade tree has to be removed or has to be heavily pruned, it should be removed as a preference, and a smaller tree replaced.
Okay.
I mean, it's
Small stature, like a
Yeah.
short growing tree.
Yeah, because
Because
there's too many of these large trees being butchered.
Year in and year out.
To the point where they look structurally unsafe. I mean, there's examples on East State Street now where we've got these very large trees that are completely lopsided, and you worry
Yeah.
about how long they're
The
going to
ash
survive.
tree, yeah.
Yeah,
Right, they're creating hazards that the
Yeah.
city will have to address.
yeah.
But David, there's one problem there because some owners want to save the tree,
Oh, I
no
know.
matter what happens to it.
Yeah.
And are we going to
Well,
override
no,
them?
what we can do is we can put in the language that that on that removal thing, that they should negotiate that with the adjacent property owner. But it has to be, I mean, at the moment, they claim they do that, but we don't have evidence that they're actually doing it. And so they will be required to have a written agreement with because if we're going to be left with a tree that's that lopsided that we're going to have to finish up removing, they're simply passing
Yes.
the cost over to the taxpayer.
Ooh, that's good. Why don't you go there tonight? That's it, passing the cast.
Now, AEP does contract out, so they're not the really,
Asplund win awards in Eastern State for their tree pruning on behalf of AEP. There's
Oh,
no
really?
reason why they can't win awards here.
okay. So we should
they do win awards, it's just that.
Where
So
do,
for
we
high
find,
quality-
where do we find that? I wanted to, somebody else.
It's in it was either in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. There's a big advert proclaiming how wonderful they are.
Can you, can I get that from you at some point? Is it easy to do, could you scan it and email it to me, or?
Possibly, I'll have to
Or
have a
even
look
just,
at
if you
it.
give me the date, I can go on, I can search in the archives of the.
Okay, it'll be tonight before I can get it.
No, I don't need it for tonight, but
Okay.
because other towns are, I mean, you guys aren't alone. You know, other municipalities are
Yeah.
really, really concerned about this, and,
But if you go to the Eastern States and look and see how AEP's wires are,
well, everybody keeps
They're
saying
there.
that, and you're right, but I need some concrete proof to say, look, I would love to.
and they're using the same national contractor, Asplund, for doing this. So
These guys are trained arborists.
A lot of times you can go on their website and they'll have their awards that they've gotten too.
Asplund does, the Asplund website?
Yeah, that's a good place to check,
Okay,
because they do update those periodically with the awards they've received.
There's a thought.
all right, thanks.
Elaku, could you type up your summary that you gave us,
Yeah.
give us a copy and maybe some of your contact information?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is just sort of off the top of my head this morning, but I'll try to get something more detailed.
Yeah.
Get that to, who should I?
Email it to me. That's okay.
You gonna put your email
We're
on
almost
the
done. We
TV?
can-
I'll write that for you.
Necessarily announce
Yeah, just send that down.
Oh,
Although
here
it's
you go.
pretty simple, I have to say.
You don't have an
My contact.
AthensTreeCommission.com?
I wish I did. I'm causing our carrier terrible problems.
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, is it her email right there?
It's just from another letter.
Yeah, so, okay, oh, you already did it. Thank you. Well, yeah.
Should we plan to take responsibility for getting information about electric companies' prunings and standards and things that are being done in other places for the benefit of the city council when it comes time to actually do something about a new contract? I mean, it sounds like we're talking about doing
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but should we really officially take the responsibility for
Mhm.
attempting to get some of this information?
Yes,
I think so.
don't you think?
Yeah,
That makes-
yeah.
It's an illogical body.
Yeah.
You know, another,
College
I think we should, and even if they're different council members, down the road, I think if we're ready and we have information for them. Another thing that maybe we should make them aware of, some towns, Zanesville, included, maybe I brought this up, but they're considering charging an assessment for the use of public right-of-way for utility lines. Do you guys know about this?
Yeah, that's been discussed before, actually, a couple
I
of
was
years ago.
surprised it wasn't in that ordinance, because again, it's a normal thing to charge for
Zanesville's getting
them
money.
doing it.
Yeah, but I
mean-
think
Getting
they're.
money to do it.
Originally, I think it has to do with the Time Warner franchise, basically cable company franchise, and there's some kind of structure that's in place right now. I know it was discussed about 3 or 4 years ago before I was on council, because there was some kind of cable, fiber optic company that wanted to use that telephone poles in the right-of-way. So it becomes, this is one of the discussions, public use of right-of-ways. How do we do that? Whether it's the mailbox on Court Street to the telephone poles and cable lines and stuff. But I don't remember where it went to. It was before I was on council. But I know it's been looked at.
And there's a new agreement that was just drafted in Zanesville.
Okay.
Their safety service director was the one who really pushed it, and I think they're using that assessment money for sidewalk repairs and road maintenance and stuff, but
Fancy trees, maybe.
Well, of course, you know that I went there. It didn't happen that way, but yeah, especially because trees, there's so many tree-related utility conflicts. I mean, that would have been a natural marriage, I thought. But yeah,
Okay, Zanesville.
I can get you his name. Mike Sims is the name of the public safety service director in the city of Zanesville. I could get you his phone number, or maybe that's something for Wayne Key, since they would be comparable. Maybe Wayne should talk to Mike Sims and see how that happened or something.
See what they do, really, is
Yeah.
what you're saying, just to see what kind of model they're using.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, all right.
Okay,
Thank
service
you.
director.
Thank you. I think we are at the end of our agenda, unless is there any other business out there?
Did I miss the approval of the minutes? I assume I did.
Oh, my, yes, you did.
Okay.
It's because we always.
Start with that? Okay.
Yes, we always start with that.
Okay,
And it
well,
happened so
I
quickly, you
don't see it
didn't
on the
notice.
agenda.
So that nanosecond at the very beginning.
Okay.
So our apologies, yes, we have minutes from Candy, and
Yeah, I've got them, and I just wasn't sure.
thank you very much. We'll get some.
Oh, you have an approval? Oh, I thought I was.
She did it very quickly.
Sorry.
It's true. We're really barely paper trained, so it's very hard to be bureaucratically correct.
Paper trail.
So, if people would please look over the minutes, which I think you may also have received on email earlier.
Well, they look appropriate. I mean, they look good. So.
Okay.
One question I had while we're on this is the city website and the maintenance of these sorts of things. I mean,
What do you mean?
well, I spoke to, I think, the person who maintains it, and he said he just needs the stuff sending to him.
Ron Forrest, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, is it as simple as that?
Probably.
Probably.
Okay.
So-
Because, I'd like to see those, I'd like to see our agenda and our minutes.
Yeah, and
I thought the agendas were up. No, they're
the
not.
agendas appear as, announcement of the meeting and the draft of the agenda
Okay.
on the government channel, but I don't, this
So-
doesn't, so we should, Candy, may we ask you the favor of emailing them approved minutes? May I ask for approval of minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes. Got a second?
Second?
Okay. I'm in agreement.
Approval?
Yes.
Here's a very quiet approval of the minutes.
What happens if you don't approve?
You have to debate it.
Well, you can amend it, so you like
Oh,
what you
okay.
like.
Yes, right.
If there's something missing that you think is very important that was not in the minutes, then you can amend it to add that.
I've often wondered about when you adjourn and somebody objects.
I don't think anybody will.
Yeah.
Shall we adjourn?
Yes, we'll adjourn.
Yes, okay,
We are
we're adjourned.
Thanks, Alan.